Today is going to be an important introduction to a topic you're not going to want to miss. Uh, Wanted to talk about the subject of spiritual stonewalling, which is essentially um, using religion to shun people and treat them as undesirable. And so you can see this in different communities. You can see it when someone decides that they no longer have any obligation to talk to someone else and don't have to explain it. And so it's important to note that this isn't um, healthy examples of setting boundaries and cutting someone off, because we in the mental health world do believe that there's a huge place for that, for saying, these are my boundaries. I can't accept this treatment and best wishes to you, but you're not for me and I can't have you in my life. We do encourage that as therapists. We don't advise typically, we counsel. We help people to clarify their own boundaries and to understand what it is they want. It's not our goal to tell clients as therapists what to want. So, stonewalling refers to one of the four horsemen of relationship apocalypse from the amazing John Gottman. Um, and he and his wife are fellow therapists who've created a ton of curricula surrounding marriage and dating and romance and family dynamics. So stonewalling, I don't believe they invented the term, but they found it as a research construct that signaled the end of a relationship. So that's why it's one of the horsemen of apocalypse. It means your relationship, particularly romantic, is in danger and not doing well, because stonewalling is there: contempt, defensiveness, criticism, the big four, you could say, of those four horsemen. Those are who they are. So stonewalling is using avoidance and a capacity to punish another person. Okay. So spiritual stonewalling is avoiding his punishment and using a holier than thou approach to doing so. And I think it's distinct enough that it deserves its own terminology. So examples of this could include um, someone, taking offense at another person and deciding to no longer speak. I've been given examples of this, and I want to respect privacy. Actually, the examples I would use are not from clients, they're actually friends. So, be that as it may, I also want to be respectful of that and say, I had a friend who thought that he was dating someone, and this is a guy who's very introverted and very level and pretty stable. So he's not one to take offense, or he's not neurotic, not very neurotic at all, and not very disagreeable. So it turned out that he'd hung out and had spent time with this uh, lady, and it had involved him buying, dinner here and there and hanging out. And there was an incident where she said, "Oh, well, this isn't a date, is it?" And then he had said he thought it was. And so then she just didn't speak to him anymore. And they just kept going to the same young adult group and seeing each other live every week. And he wanted to clarify it and was fine being friends, but she didn't pick up the phone or pick up the text. So this blew me away. I couldn't believe it. Um, because I couldn't see anybody punishing this kind of dude for that. Um, so but and what's wild is I knew both of them as people, and so I'd kind of wondered what was up, because this person I noticed didn't talk anymore, and I'd done some kind of collaboration before, and I'll probably edit this part out. I'll probably edit a lot of this out and just use this for definitions and brainstorming. But um, it was very bizarre, because I don't know. There's something that goes with, in faiths where you're supposed to actually be the best example, people can be the worst. So with Christianity, and I'm Christian, so disclosure there, but with Christianity, there seems to be the belief that because you're always forgivable, that anything you do is justifiable. And I think that's a huge mouthful and it's very dangerous. So, with spiritual stonewalling, believing that you are like God's prince or princess and that you can cut people off and don't owe them an explanation is very harsh because Christ created a new technology for interaction. And thank you for all the friends who've joined. I saw some amazing people hop right on as I started here. So thank you. But the idea of turning the other cheek interpersonally and the idea of trying to understand and be a positive presence for others, I don't, I would say is a huge part of Christianity. I don't think you can deny that. I don't think there's any denying that anyone who knows anything about the faith would be able to justify the mass levels of spiritual stonewalling that we see of Gen Z and, cutoff culture, which is a huge thing, by the way. And I've talked about avoidance culture. I might start calling it cutoff culture because that's more alliterative. But so there's an impulse now to narrow, the narrowing impulse. And I think it really started with online dating and social media because you were hit with mass numbers of people and you needed a way to pare that down. So how do you do that? Well, you look for opportunities to cut people off. So it's very dangerous. In the past, humanity would look for reasons to band together. So to survive a very inhospitable world. And so essentially there is a an urge to self-protect, to protect the self. Okay. So I mean, if someone will so with spiritual stonewalling, a good indication it's happening is obviously someone isn't speaking to you anymore. Someone is um, speaking a lot less frequently. They look for ways to avoid talking. They are, you had a disagreement recently or something where you put up a boundary, right? Those are all examples of that. So I would say so when we have Bible verses that say that within the church, if someone has a grievance, that you talk to the person, you talk it out. So there is no spiritual defense in the Bible or in Christian theology of spiritual bypassing. There actually isn't any. The defense is I'm the defense is a more theological, non-scriptural one of. And I don't even think people would find that they need to offer it, but if they did, it would probably be, "I have the right to talk to who I want," which is totally true. Again, so when capitalism and American values infiltrate Christian theology, you have a way to cover all bases and say, "I'm saved and going to heaven, but I don't owe anyone anything," because that's the predominant narrative in our culture. So if you look at it, people can collect kind of like armor that covers up any area where they would have to do anything. So it covers up any area of empathy, any area of obligation. And so you can say, well, so I'm a sinner and I need help. Great, I get that. But also I have a lot of rights and I'm an American. Okay, so I have that. So there's no area there for descending to others' needs and helping them, right? For going down in your conception of yourself and risking offense, risking rejection, risking misunderstanding. It's all about self-protection. And so um if you're forgiven for everything and anything and you're always just learning and a sinner, people can use that as an excuse to keep doing bad behavior and being spiritually infantile. But that's not what we're called to do. And frankly, if you think for 5 minutes or less, many unsaved quote people can show great moral development. And so as a Christian, your goal should be to at least reach that. So we have different temperatures in each era, and it would be interesting to look at what era has what. But now we're in the era of blocking and avoidance. We're in an era of avoidance. And so it's because the metaphors and the systems that we have now all trend toward that. So the scroll, like stopping the scroll, okay? You can read an infinite amount now almost, more than you could ever read in your lifetime. Just go through Twitter scrolling up and down. I don't know if anyone's ever come to the end of their scroll or on Instagram. I don't know if you can if you follow enough people because it'll just keep refreshing. So I would say in the past, the idea of, and so that's viewing as well. Like YouTube creates an infinite view loop with, watch next. So now we have we used to have the idea of putting in a VCR film. You put in the tape, it goes from start to finish, and you rewind it and you take it out. So the metaphor we had for that, for memory, the metaphor for media usage, for audiovisual was uh, something finite that in an orderly way was played forward and rewinded back. And now we don't have that. Everything is constant all the time. Media is never ending, truly, because you could always just tune to another live stream. There actually isn't really an end to what you can watch in your 90 some years on Earth. So I just have to call that out. I'm sure psychoanalytically there's some huge depth to that, of the fact that media can now swallow you. Like in the past, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, you could probably watch every movie ever made and just say, well, that was it. That's movies. You can't do that now. There's no way. So, I mean, it would have to be your whole existence. So, and you wouldn't be able to really watch YouTube or videos or anything like that. So, why does this all matter for spiritual stonewalling? Well, I think deep down we know that. We know we have a very limited amount of time, somewhat, right? In the scheme of things. And there's a very specific amount of stuff we can do in that. And we constantly have to preserve our time. Now, in the interpersonal world, how that generalization occurs from protect your time from media or don't protect your time with that, I'd have to do some work on that. It also could very well, honestly, be just the fact that there's so much pop psychology around the fact that you're being essentially manipulated or abused if anyone ever asks you to do anything. Now, I'm being very facetious. Um, I will say that even so, there's quite a lot of content that says your needs matter and don't worry about others. There is plenty that says that. It's like, well, where can you put that quote, Jeremy? Well, it's the quote. It's more focusing on only what you need and never who to become, right? Because that's what that says. If everything is focused on what you deserve and not who you should become, then there's no self-development or growth. And so you will spiritually stonewall someone rather than resolve conflict. So spiritual stonewalling shows a lack of desire to resolve problems, as that could cause discomfort. It could cause admission of guilt. It could cause temporary panic. It could cause, well, internet connection is unstable. It could cause a variety of different issues that are the same thing that go along with any conflict, right? So if any conflict is scary, then there isn't some that there okay, there we go. Internet not stable. If any conflict is scary, then the solution is to avoid it. And that conflict is undesirable at all costs. And even disagreement is. And so I would say that spiritual stonewalling is the natural logical conclusion of avoidance culture, and that it becomes easy to do that. It becomes easy to give in to the awkward. I don't want to have a conversation with someone. I don't want to risk having an argument. I don't want to hear their side. Why? Like, what is the what are you called to do? It's also interesting that public speaking is consistently rated as more frightening than death, and I think obviously not gonna say death if they're thinking about, like, their fear in life. So that's skewed from the jump, but that old joke from statistics that, more people are afraid of public speaking than death. Yeah, because 'cause they're asked, "What's your fear?" I'm guessing. So, I think more people Christians talk about being martyrs and about being willing to be martyrs, but I think they're more afraid of actually turning the other cheek. I think they're legitimately because they can have these thought experiments. I've been in groups before where there's a lot of pettiness, but they talk constantly about martyrdom. And so if you're going to talk about that, that's my soapbox. If you're going to discuss something that heavy and heady, you really need to be living differently, where you don't talk to two people and have your insular life. And if you really think that if you want to be a great bold leader, you need to live more like Billy Graham. You really do. So there's no way around that. And there's a lot of church hurt, and no wonder, because people are stonewalled or punished. It's like an Amish shunning, right? It all goes back to the impulse to deny, to repress, to treat someone as a contaminant, and no, it's unhealthy. It creates extreme hurt and resentment. And so, if you found this helpful, please share your own examples of spiritual stonewalling. I really want to explore this more as a pet project because I know that many people go through situations through church hurt and other institutional forms of denigration, let's put it that way. Narcissism, yeah, other stuff as well. Histrionics, people saying things they don't mean, being inviting just for showiness but not truly meaning it would be an example of being histrionic. Just being very showy, like, oh, you're always welcome. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Um, avoidant attachment in the church. I need to be very honest and say, if we learn anything from Christ, it certainly isn't to have avoidant attachment and to cut people off. Um, Especially if we look at the examples of Judas and his role, and we look at the apostles, and we look at Christ and the disciples, I mean, and then we look at how Peter denied Christ, right? Like, and that was important as a story that others can fail us, and how do we respond to that? And we will fail, but do we avoid? And then what if Peter had avoidant attachment, or Jesus had, and he had been stonewalled off. Peter had been stonewalled off. The story of the scripture would be that you make a mistake and you're doomed, and you better not make one. So again, the problem is that it's so perplexing people would behave this way. There's clearly a mass cultural trend toward isolation because there is no other explanation other than constant constant drip, like an IV, of messages that you can never be uncomfortable. There is something there, something that says discomfort means chaos, discomfort means danger. And it does not always. I really want everyone to know that discomfort is developmentally dutiful and desirable. I'm trying to get all the D's in here. I don't like the way that came out. Uh, or maybe I wanted a more sensationalistic headline. Who knows? But um, yeah, I think we have to look at the fact that any good analyst worth their salt is going to be aware that and tell you that discomfort can shape the personality in a healthy way. Trauma or feeling that you can't hold up to discomfort at all, right, is what actually harms someone. And it takes quite a few, it takes a very severe or quite a few examples of that to traumatize someone. And I think we now have gone so far the other way that we view others as walking trauma, and that if they disagree or in some way inconvenience us, we need to cut them out because they could hurt our mental health. Well, if they're not being abusive or neglectful, then no. And maybe it's iron sharpening iron. So, all right, drive time podcast on the way to work. Hope y'all enjoyed it. If you did, drop some thoughts. I'm gonna probably edit this one, have it out there first, just in the ether as a post, so I don't lose it, because I don't want to. I heard in the grapevine that if you don't post the chat, sometimes people have actually lost the recording if they haven't posted it as well a post. So I'm gonna do that, but I'll probably clean it up too. So, all right, thanks so much, everyone. Great to see y'all on this Monday on my way to work here.